Hi everyone, welcome to Kembali 2020, a Rebuild Bali Festival, a digital program designed to inspire, excite, reconnect, and revitalize the Balinese and Indonesian community from 29 October to 8 November 2020. Kembali, the Indonesian word for return or comeback, represent revitalization in the face of global challenges. The festival will unite people in Bali and Indonesia together with an international audience at a time when travel is largely impossible and creating connection is more important than ever before. We are honored today to have Etgar Keret with us for our main program, Anything But Ordinary. Etgar is a leading voice in Israeli literature and cinema. His books and short stories were published in more than 46 languages, and over 100 short films have been based on his stories. Etgar is also a full professor and teaches at Ben Gurion University of the Negev. His latest collection, Fly Already, won the most prestigious literary award in Israel, the Sapir Prize in 2018, and the National Jewish Book Award of the Jewish Book Council. Hello, Edgar. Thank you
Hi.
for joining us from Tel Aviv.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a long time since I've been to Bali, and this is the closest I can get these days, only through Zoom.
Yeah, unfortunately, but fortunately as well in this
Yeah.
case. Um, I believe it's been 10 years since your thrilling appearance at the past Ubud Writers and Readers Festival, wasn't it?
Yes, it's been 10 years, and really, I've been fantasizing about returning ever since. Really, this is one of the most lovely places I've been in Earth. Not only that it's beautiful, but the people are so nice and generous. I only have good memories from Bali.
Fingers crossed you'll make your way here soon.
Hopefully,
When all of this is over, right?
yes.
Tell us about Tel Aviv. What are the current emotions that run there at the moment?
Well, here we just ended our second lockdown because the pandemic, we go had a second wave here. I
Mm,
think people are very, very frustrated and are unhappy about our government because they felt that the government was very incompetent dealing with the problems and basically just thinking about their narrow political interests and not what's good for the people. And actually, the Tel Aviv and the country is now full of demonstrations against our prime minister, asking him to
mm.
resign. So it's funny because the pandemic somehow is in the background because in the foreground is people's frustration that it started long before the pandemic, but they kind of exploded now.
It is sort of the catapult, the energy that propels everything forward. Is it?
Yeah, I think that there is something with the pandemic or a virus that when it attacks a human body, it always exposes your weaknesses. If you have weak lungs, it will attack the lungs. If you have a weak kidney, it will attack the kidney. And I think that when a pandemic attacks a society, it also exposes its weaknesses. It exposes if if it lacks solidarity, if people see themselves as two different tribes, if they have distrust for the government, the pandemic will bring it all out. It will expose those weak parts because usually when we deal with a challenge, we win it by strength, but also on the way we learn more about our weaknesses. And I'm afraid that at least in Israel, one of the things that was discovered was how doubtful people are about the interests of the government. Because ideally, when you have a government, you think that there are people there who think of your best interests. But in the pandemic, many people came out to the street and they say, the government really doesn't care for me, for my job, for my ability to earn a living, for my medical care. They just care for their political powers. I'm not sure if we lost the connection. Can you still hear me?
A little bit. Yeah, but I can hear you
Oh, it's a
now
problem.
perfectly and see you
Okay,
as well.
okay.
Yeah, but that's a very good point that you made there. And it has been a wild year, I would say, like something out of your story, actually.
Very much so. Very much so. You know,
Yeah.
I think that for me, many times stories uh, uh, begin from a premise that could sound almost ridiculous. You know, like I say, okay, what happened if tomorrow, I don't know, all our pets will start talking and singing, or what happened if people discover they can uh, learn your true nature by looking at your nostril or something like this. And then, you know, I begin a story, and these stories, even if the premise is totally ridiculous, they are not about the premise. They are about the human spirit and the human mind. So I use this premise as a kind of a laboratory. You know, I throw inside this. I say, let's do an experiment. How people would act if this, or how would people act if the reality was different? And I think with the pandemic, this is exactly what happened, because suddenly the rules were changed. Suddenly we couldn't do things the way we used to. And this had created many different effects among people. Some people became happier. You know, some people during the lockdown said, I discovered my family. You know, before this, I would only go to work, and now I see my children and I know why I work hard and I have reason for life. And some people staying in the lockdown, they say, I discovered I don't like my family. I was with my family for 3 months and discovered that I don't like my children and I don't like my husband, you know. So so I think that there is something in this kind of an extreme changing of rules that always exposes something that is usually hidden. It's very much like, you know, sometimes when you move from one apartment to another apartment, that when you do this, you discover many things in your apartment that you don't really need. But only when you pack, you say, "Oh, why do I keep these books? I never read them. Why do I keep this chair? I never sit in it." But you need to move to discover that. You need to move to another place. And I think that with the pandemic, it's like moving to another apartment. So it makes us look at our life and say, "Oh, this is not necessary. This we will not need in our new lives. But this I discovered it's more important than I thought before." So I think we can use the pandemic as a test. I give you a silly example, okay? That for example, uh, you know, when people talk about the pandemic, many people said humanity will never be the same because people will not hug each other. We have lost
Correct.
physical contact. Now, I don't agree with this assessment because I look at my life and I'm very much afraid of the pandemic. So let's say before the pandemic, I hug everybody. And today, many times I meet somebody in the streets, they want to hug me. I say to them, please don't touch me. You know, I don't want to have COVID, and it's okay.
Mm.
But when I meet my best friend and when I meet my brother, I always hug them. I still hug them now. When I hug my brother, I know it's dangerous, but I can't help myself. I still hug him. So I say, okay, now thanks to the corona, I know how to tell false hug from true hugs. Thanks to the corona, maybe before the corona, you ask me, who do you like better, your brother or your neighbor? I would say, I don't know. But now my body tells me that my brother I have to hug, and my neighbor I refuse to hug. So maybe by putting a price tag, now there is something about physical contact that became more truthful, because you don't touch everybody, you don't just shake hands, you only touch the
Yeah.
people you care about. So I think that sometimes a difficulty can also be an opportunity, and this has a lot to do with the stories that we tell ourselves.
I agree with you. I think it is now the time to deconstruct everything that we thought we knew, and hopefully there will be something new that come out of this, right? Like you said, like
For
sort
sure,
of
for
like,
sure.
yeah. And how does this pandemic affect you in your work as a writer?
Well, it's funny because my work as a writer is to wake up in the morning to say to other people who want to talk to me, stay away, go to my room, close the door. Imagine I'm a fisherman in Canada. I'm I don't know, a mountain climber in Europe. I'm a surfer in Bali. And then in the evening, come out of my room and say, "Hi, everybody." So basically, during the pandemic but I'm all the time in a situation of lockdown. I'm all the time in a situation of social distancing. So for me, if anything, I think that there was something about the pandemic and the lockdown that I thought maybe now other people will know how I live, and maybe now they will be less jealous, and they say, you know what? The life that Edgar lives is not an easy life. The life of an artist is not an easy life. It's also difficult.
So yeah, this pandemic proof like this is the life of a writer, like every day, right?
Because I think that that the thing that was very typical for lockdown is that it forced people to either be innovative and full of imagination, or to become depressed. Because, for
Mm.
example, if you have work and you don't go to work, then you can sit home and say, "Oh, I want to go outside. I can't go outside." But you can also say, "I always wanted to be a chef. Today, I will make the most elaborate cake ever." Or you could say, "I wanted to be a world champion in running. Maybe I will run around my house." Or, you could find yourself some kind of purpose and use. And I think that when you're an artist, many times when you sit down and write, this is exactly what you do. You say, I'm not me. I'm a chef. I'm a runner. I'm a teacher. I'm something else. And I think that this ability, that when we are locked in a room, to open a door in our mind and imagination and basically walk somewhere, it creates the opposite effect. Instead of us feeling trapped inside this lockdown, we are being released by this lockdown. Because if we have to go to work and put the kids in school and do all those things, we cannot open this extra door in our mind that will take us to a place that we've never been in before.
So I dare say you've been creating a lot of interesting stuff in the past few months too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there is something about it that is. I think that artists, they need friction. I think that when things are too easy, there is no need for art. I wrote the biggest number of stories when I was during my compulsory army service, because when I was in the army, life was difficult and I had many problems with the world around me, and my way to I couldn't resolve it. I couldn't talk to my commanders or punish the army. So I could only do it through writing. And I think that it's in time when we have difficulties and barriers that we cannot change in life. This is the time where we revert, to our imagination, and we start inventing stories. And the harder the times are, I find myself that I'm getting more and more creative. Because if life is good, if I'm in Bali, and I eat pineapple and I sit with the lovely friends on the beach, I have no need to write a story. I'm happy. But if I see that injustice in the street, if I see pain, if I see things around me that shouldn't be this way, but I cannot change them, the only thing I can do is write a story.
It is a mean to escape in a way, right?
So I don't think it's a mean to escape so much as it's a mean to protest, because I
To
think
protest.
that to escape means to leave your problem behind. But actually, I think that what you do when you write, you focus on your problem, and you sometimes focus on your frustration of being unable to solve them in real life. So it's not that I have a problem. For example, I have a problem. Uh, you don't love me. My heart is broken. I cry in my room. So I will not write a story about me riding a horse, because this will not make me forget you. I will write a story about me trying to win your heart. So basically, this is not suppressing our problem. This is a way of dealing with our problem. When we cannot deal with our problems with reality, we can deal with them through our imagination.
That's a good answer. And I just saw the proof of that. I just saw your movie, like your short movie. It's called Outside, your
Yes.
COVID-19 fairy tale, as you call it. Can you tell us about the creative process? What was the spark that made you created it in the first place?
Yeah, so basically it's based on a story called Outside that I've published in the New York Times. And it's a story about a world where they have a lockdown in the pandemic. And when the lockdown is over, people refuse to go to the street because they discover that they don't like human society so much. And the government has to send the police and army to make people go back to the street, force people to go back to their old life. And the story that I wrote, I have a friend who is a choreographer, who's a dancer and a choreographer called Imbal Pinto, and she really liked it. And we decided that because in the pandemic, it's very, very difficult to create and it's very, very difficult to release things, that we will do a guerrilla production of an adaptation of this short story, and we will do it with our friends, with some support. And by this, we will create something and take it out to the world, immediately reacting. Because I said to him, but many times, let's say, I'm sure there will be many movies and books about the pandemic 3 years from now. But we need those
Yes.
books now. We need those movies now. So we're going to do a movie now, and I'm going to write stories and release them now. You know, I publish stories in the New Yorker, in the New York Times, in New York Book Review, all about the pandemic, because I thought that as an artist, I engage in a dialogue with my readers. And when there is a problem, I want to say to them, oh my God, I'm scared. I want to say to them, please help me. I want to say to them, I want to hug you, but I'm not allowed to because of the pandemic. I want to say to them now. I don't want to wait for 6 years to write a book about it. And I think that with the internet, when I can make a movie and put it on my YouTube channel, I can write a story, put it on my Facebook, or put it on a portal that will run it just 2 days after I wrote it. The ability to be in constant dialogue with your readers, it's much greater. And I do it not because I think I'm a guru and my readers need my wisdom. I do it because I need my readers. I need to share with other people my anxieties and my hopes and thoughts. I need to have some kind of a support group in these crazy times that we're going through.
I completely agree. I watch it. It's 7 minutes long, correct? And
Yes.
yeah, I totally can relate with the characters in that movie within that 7 minutes, I would
You know
say.
that we wanted, especially because it's about a dialogue or even love story between a woman and a person in her television set. And we wanted on purpose to bring them both from different culture, different languages, different ethnicities. So one of them, the girl, that she's a little bit Alice in COVID land, she's like Alice in Wonderland.
I
And
can relate to her. Yes.
so she's Israeli, and the guy in the TV that they have an affair or fall in love is Japanese. So we wanted in purpose when he speaks to her in the movie, the viewers, they have subtitles, but she doesn't understand what he says. So even in the scene when they it, communicate with each other, he talks to her in Japanese, but she, unlike the audience, doesn't understand a word of what he's saying. So there was something very, I think, for me, very authentic on shot, because it's not that she's acting that she doesn't understand. She truly doesn't understand what the actor is saying.
And when did you write the short story?
I
Outside.
wrote it. I wrote it. I think it was around May, and it was the. I wrote it on the first day after the lockdown, because during the first
Mm.
lockdown, I really, really fantasized about going to the street. I live in Tel Aviv, a very big city, like Jakarta. I live close to a very main street. And after all these months of being alone, I imagined that I go in the street and I say hello to people, and and it's a great experience. But when the lockdown ended and I went to the street, it was very noisy, and people had bad smell, and they ignored me, and they pushed me, and they were not nice. And after 5 minutes, I said, was a bad idea. When the lockdown ended, I should just stay home because people are really they're a problem. They're too noisy and too smelly and too pushy. And of course, this is a sensation that passed away, but it took me time to adjust again, to a big crowd. And I must say that in this case, I think that there is something in the lockdown that it's a little bit like meditating, because if I meditate, I return to my life, but I see my life as something new. And when I see my life as something new, I discover advantages in it and disadvantages. And the same thing goes with lockdown. Because, for example, now after lockdown, there is something about me that I like to see buses in the street. I don't know why, but when I see a bus, I say, "Oh, this giant car! It's like an elephant to swallow the little car. Oh, it's so amazing." But before this, I don't even look at buses. But before the pandemic, I was not aware of how noisy the street is. And during the pandemic, when I walk down an empty street, now I say, "Oh my God, I cannot hear the birds. I cannot hear the birds because of this car." So I needed the lockdown to understand that there are birds too, to look for them with my eyes. So I really feel that there was something in this entire process that it's not like I think that after the pandemic, I think that life is worse or better. I just discovered nuances in them for good and bad that I was not aware of them before.
Okay. And for the audiences at home, wherever you are, you can access and watch this outstanding short film from Edgar on outside-film.com. So
Yeah,
yeah, don't miss the
or on my
opportunity.
YouTube channel. You can also, if
Or
you if you go to the YouTube and look for my channel, then I have quite a few movies, but it will be on the top.
so there are more treats there in your YouTube channel.
Oh
Wonderful.
yeah, yeah. There are a lot of shorts made based on my stories and other movies that I've made with my wife.
And you told me before, like you're different after the lockdown. And do you have a new set of, I don't know, certain routine for writing, for example, that you feel is different than before?
Well, I must say that that I never had a routine for writing, because I think this is either the advantage or disadvantage of a short story writer, that basically it's a little bit like writing a poem. You need to have something to write about to sit down and write. It's not that I can sit in the morning and say, "Okay, today I write," and I can. I think when you're a novelist, you can always advance in your novel. But when you're a short
Mm.
story writer, if you don't have a story to write, you don't have a story to write. So I actually don't have a writing discipline. But the thing that had really changed, and the thing that it kind of took me to a new ground or to a new place, is the fact that now I have so much free time that I get bored more easily. And I think that boredom is very important for creativity, because when we're interested and excited, when you see a movie and you really like the movie, you never have good ideas because you just see the movie. But if you sit on your balcony and you do nothing and you say, "You know what? I think tomorrow I'm going to plant an avocado tree," but you need to be bored, you need to be vacant to have new ideas. So, one thing for the lockdown, and for the pandemic, that because it isolates me from my daily chores, I have much more time to think about it.
Okay, so your first book was published in 1992, and you've
Yes.
been actively churning out works now years. Looking back on your career, like how does your love, your passion for storytelling evolves over the years?
Well, I think that there is something about the way that I write my stories. It's very much like a reflex in the sense that in the sense that you know, if I move my hand quickly to your face, you will close your eyes, but you will not decide to close your eyes. It's an instinct, you know, or reflex. So I think that I write stories by some kind of a reflex or an instinct. So I think that even now, 30 years after beginning to write my stories, I don't make a conscious decision to write. I find myself next to paper. I find myself writing things. I find the story taking control on me. So the technique did not change, but I think that the thing that changed over the 30 years was me. When I began to write, I was a young man interested in, I don't know, falling in love, finding a job, getting my own apartment. Later, I started writing stories about paying mortgage, or you know, or moving to a bigger place, or taking care of an elderly parent, you know. So I think that as I change, my stories change, but because they're so instinctive, I don't feel that I learn or improve my technique over the years.
Is there any other medium that you still wish to explore as a storyteller? You've done short film, you've done graphic novels, you've done a lot of things.
Uh, well, I think that when even when I go to new mediums, usually it's not the medium that attracts me; it's the a chance to collaborate. So, for example, the outside that I did with Zimbal Pinto, it's a half a movie, half a dance. And what motivated me to do it was not that I wanted to work with dancers as much as I wanted to work with Zimbal, because I saw her works and it was fascinating. So, for example, if Shira and me made a TV series in France with the actor Mathieu Amalric, who's a
Mm,
wonderful actor.
he is,
He
yes.
so for us, our motivation was not to make a series in French, but was to work with Mathieu Amalric, to work with this person. So for me, I think that a artistic collaboration, it's like a friendship. It's like a way for me to celebrate some kind of connection with an interesting mind. And I think that, you know, I did comics and I did short stories and I wrote lyrics for songs and I wrote plays. But in the end, the things that dictated my decision was basically the people I could have the chance to work with.
And how is the process of this creation together? Like some of the movies, for instance, was based on your short stories, but does it happen like you meet somebody, an individual, an artist that you are attracted with his or her work, then you decided to create something new altogether?
Yes, I think that first, when it comes to adaptations, it's basically somebody who gives his reading of my story, and it's always exciting for me to see adaptations made of my work. It's like entering the mind of a reader. But when it comes to new collaborations, when I work together with somebody, we co-direct, or I write and another person direct. When I make those collaborations, I think that the thing that is most dominating in such a process is to find what me and this person has in common, and to hang to this common point, and from it to grow branches in different directions. So, for example, let's say I can say that me and my wife, we have a totally different artistic perspective. You know, she's in her spirit a poet. I'm in my spirit a storyteller. But for example, we both have problem with closure. It's very difficult for both of us to say goodbye. Since we were children, when our parents would or friends say goodbye, we say goodbye. But when they go, we go as after them and say, please stay, goodbye, goodbye, and we go after the car. You know, so we can make a work together around closure because it's something that is important for both of us. But the way we will deal with issues like closure or parenthood or family or siblings would be different. And this would mean that the relationship we will describe in our work would be richer, because it will take the two minds, and it will be like when you do a fusion kitchen. You know, you take something from Asian cuisine and then you take something from Russian cuisine and you put it together. So when me and a collaborator work together, we take this same experience or same phenomena from our mind, but we tackle it together and we fuse this kind of two experiences to one experience.
It's wonderful. Um, and I understand that you have a new book coming. Is that correct? Fly
Uh,
already?
so Fly Already, yeah, it's a book. It's funny because it's called different names in different countries because it's many places it's called a glitch at the edge of the galaxy, but uh,
Okay.
but in English it's called Fly Already. And yeah, it's a my latest book, and it's very interesting because it's a book that I wrote for the past 7 years, you know. But I feel that in its spirit it talks a lot about the time of the pandemic because it's a book about isolation and loneliness and a world in which the technology keeps advancing and people find themselves confused and sometimes alone, seeking connection and trying to deal with those constant changes in the life around them. So I wrote this book, you know. I think, you know, I started writing it around 2015, but in the bottom line, it seems to be portraying the reality of the pandemic without even being aware of the pandemic.
How many short stories are there in the book?
I don't know exactly, but I would say more than 20. I maybe 23 or 25. I don't know.
Okay. And how did you, over the years, how did you kind of pick these different short stories that you've been collecting and writing over the years? How did you select the one that you will put in this book?
Well, for
What
me,
was the process?
I think that the book is a little bit has to have some kind of a shared zeitgeist. You know, it should be
Yeah.
about some shared experience. For example, if for me this book is a lot about the accelerated speed in which the world is changed and how it leaves many times the people behind, how we I have to deal with the fact that our life is not what they used to be, and I think that in this sense there is something about past books that dealt with issues like parenthood or dealt with issues like a, a trying to moving from bachelor life to life of a married man. So I think that for me, if I look at my books, they're a little bit like albums, you know, photo albums. And this is the photo album of my youth, and this is of my childhood, and this one is of my wedding, and this one when we moved to another town. So I think in the end, I have to pick the stories that will create together a full picture of an emotional situation that I've been through during a period of time.
And was there like something that is life changing? Like you said before, there's sometimes there's a certain momentum that happened during your life that made you write a book. And how about this one?
So in this one, it was basically a near-death experience. I was
A near death experience.
yes,
Okay.
I was on my way to a lecture in Boston in the U.S. and I was taken
Okay.
by a driver, and the driver had a terrible car accident. And in this car accident, I broke a few of my ribs. And
Okay.
when it happened, I was sure that I was dying. So basically, I was a little bit hysterical, you know, because I said, "Oh my God, my life is gone. I will never see my family again," you know. And my way of calming myself down was to imagine some kind of a camera that moves up in the air and sees me from a distance, you know, sees the car I'm in from a
Like out
distance
of a body experience, sort
a
of.
little bit. And as I was
Yeah.
imagining that I'm moving up there, I could notice the other cars on the road, and I could see all the children going back home from school, and I could see in the ocean next to me fish swimming, and I could see life keeps going on. And I said to myself, Edgar, you are experiencing the worst tragedy you ever had. But for the world, this is nothing. It's just a glitch at the edge of the galaxy. The world will keep living. Children will keep laughing. Parents would keep dancing. Lovers would make love to each other, even when you're gone. And there was something about this thought that made me more calm. In the end, luckily, I'm alive. But there was something in this understanding that a life in a micro level is always tragic and shaking our lives, but at the same time, on a macro level, you know, in the end, Earth is just another rock in a galaxy that is just another galaxy in a universe, and whatever happens here, something will exist after it. And when you live your life subjectively, for me, the instinctive feeling is that when I die, the word disappeared. It's like a television that I turned it off. But the thought that even when we're gone, the world around us keeps living and thriving and trying and failing. There was something comforting about that. And it was from these moments that I wanted to write stories about difficult moments of people, but that at the same time there will be something hopeful that even in the failure will not destroy the universe, but maybe will open the door for some other kind of a change.
So the book is some sort of a comforting love letter you give to your readers during this hardship,
Well,
difficult time.
For me, I think that writing and reading is all about comfort and empathy and optimism. I will never write a story that will tell you that life sucks and people are horrible. Because if I want to feel that life sucks and people are horrible, I just have to go to the street, you know? I think that our default feeling is that people can be mean to each other, that there is injustice in our world. And I think that through writing, what we do is reassure our feeling of goodness, not by saying, oh, the word is good, because the word is not good, but by
Mm.
recognizing goodness in the word, by saying, this situation sucks, but look at this little child who's right now helping this bird, he knows what's true. And I think that by when we create a story, we basically take a few facts and we create different hierarchy. We say this is important and this is not important. This is the most important point and this is not important at all. And usually in our life, we are obsessed with narratives given by others. We see the news and the news say, what's important? That you will be scared of this phenomena. And what's totally unimportant is that people in the time of pandemics, they're kind and they give each other food. This is not important for us. But if I write a story, I say, what the prime minister says is not important in my story. What's important in my story is that what a neighbor helps his neighbor, that somebody who was afraid of somebody else had overcame his fear. This is the hierarchy we make in literature, and I think that they could give us both comfort and the ability to understand that even people who are our antagonists in life, even our bad neighbors, even the people we don't like, they are not there to annoy us. They have a different kind of story. Maybe this effect of the story is unfair, but that maybe in their core and in their heart, they are not that different from us. We are not a kind people who fell into a world of evildoers. We are kind people who fell into a world in which people sometimes don't know their emotions and misunderstand action and give up to their fears. But in the bottom line, they are not that different than we are.
It's humanities, right? Stories
Yeah,
about our
it's a,
humanities.
and I think that humanity and empathy sometimes, especially in times of pandemic and especially in capitalist time, they seem to be like a luxury. You say, what? We are now a tech. We don't need humanity. We don't need empathy. And this is a total misunderstanding of life because without empathy, without solidarity, we cannot survive experiences like the pandemic. The pandemic is there to show us not that life is risky and the only way we can survive is by stepping on the throat of our neighbor. It's there to show us that we exist as a society, and that if we don't assume responsibility for our neighbors, in the end they'll get sick and we will catch the sickness from them. But if we will be able to tackle our problems as a group, as a society, then our chances are better, not only in overcoming the challenges, but in also living our life to its full extent. Because if we live with no empathy, it's like we are blind or deaf or lost our ability to smell. Our life is not a full life without compassion.
I completely agree. And I'm curious about the fact that Fly already won the prestigious Sapir Prize in 2019. And as part of the Literature Prize, you were given a choice to have the book translated into a language of your preference. You chose Yiddish. What kind of affinity do you have, and why did you make that choice?
So Yiddish was the language of that the Hebrews spoke when they were in the diaspora. The
Okay.
the belief in exile, that's what they spoke, because the understanding was that Hebrew is the language of the Bible. So the
Mm.
thought was that you cannot use such a holy language to ask somebody where are the restrooms, or to say to somebody shut up, or why are you farting. You don't do that in the language of God. You don't do that in the language of the Bible. So they invented a new language that was a mixture of both Eastern European languages or and German, together with a little bit of Hebrew and a little bit of
Mm.
other languages that got picked in their exile and in their wandering across Europe. So
Okay.
this language, the things that I always liked about this language, that it doesn't have the pompousness that usually languages have. Usually a language, when you speak English, you say, "Oh dear, oh my God," and you imagine the Queen. When people speak French with a self-importance, we are the language of Voltaire. We are important people. But Yiddish did not have it, because
No.
it was an oral language and just used for communication. It was the language to say, "Oh, I have a stomach ache. Oh, I think I ate something bad." So there is something about this language that really ignores facades. It does not try
Mm.
to impress you, and it totally gives you the id of a human being, the passions, the fears, the pain. And I was very much involved by this language because it was the language my parents communicated with each other. My parents would
You.
speak to each
Okay.
other in Yiddish when they wouldn't want me to understand what they're saying. So, so I would always live next to this very, very passionate language. And when I started reading Yiddish writers in translation, like
Mm.
Bashevis Zinger, and Shalom Aleichem. There were writers who wrote in Yiddish. And what I discovered in the writing is that there was something shameless, with no shame. They could write a story about their, I don't know, the erection they have when they see the wife of the rabbi, which is something
Okay.
that you don't write about, but they felt liberated to do that, and they did it from a place that was very kind. It was not there to provoke. It was there
Mm.
to expose and to be sincere. It was like a writer telling you a secret. And because those writers influenced me so much, and because it was the language of my parents, I thought that it would only make a full circle to have my work translated to this very passionate and instinctive language.
And there's something to do with the exile. Like you told me, like Fly already is a little bit about isolation, about loneliness, about humanities.
Yeah,
Is
but,
is there
but I
something that
must say,
adds to
that
that?
I was born in Israel, but my
Mm.
sensation, my existential sensation as a human being, that I always feel in exile, because I can live in my place. I have friends, I have food, but in essentially, I feel that I belong somewhere else. You know, if I would feel in full harmony with my society, I would never write stories. But I always feel that if I go in my hometown where I was born with people who speak my language and share my culture, they will always look like strange people to me. I will always not totally understand their decision. Things will always be a little bit confusing and I'll feel like an outsider. So I think that this inherent feeling of exile uh, is also something that you are right, that attracted me to Yiddish, because Yiddish is a language of exile.
It's beautiful. Okay, at this point, as I told you before, Edgar has kindly agreed to read one of his work, The Human Cannonball. And maybe at this point, as an audience, you might want to pause, open a bottle of wine, and sit back to enjoy the story. Edgar, I will let you to start.
Thank you. So I just want to say that I chose this story because it's a story about a human cannonball, and for me, uh, every time I write a story, I feel like a human cannonball. So for me, it's an as poetic story about the writing experience. The next to last time I was shot out of a cannon. The next to last time I was shot out of a cannon was when Odelia left with the kid. I was working as a cage cleaner for the Romanian circus, which was in town. I finished the lions' cages in half an hour, and also the birds' cages, but the elephants' cages were a real killer. My back hurt, and the whole world smelled of shit. My life was ruined, and the smell of shit fit perfectly. I needed a break, so I grabbed myself a corner outside the cage and drawed a cigarette. I didn't even wash my hands before doing it. After a couple of drags, I heard a small fake cough behind me. It was the circus manager. His name was Roman, and he had won the circus in a card game. The old Romanian who originally owned the circus was holding three queens, but Roman had four of a kind. He told me the story the day he hired me. Who needs luck, he said, when you know how to cheat? I was sure Roman would make a scene because I was taking a break in the middle of work, but he didn't even look angry. Tell me, he said, you want to make an easy thousand? I nodded, and he went on. I just saw Ishtavan, our human cannonball, in his caravan. He's completely smashed. I couldn't wake him up, and his show is supposed to start in 15 minutes. Roman's open hand drew the root of a cannonball in the air, ending with his squat fingers banging against my forehead. I give you 1,000 in cash if you take his place. I've never been shot out of a cannon, I said and took another drag of my cigarette. Sure you have, Roman said. When your ex left you, when your son told you he hates you, when your fat cat ran away. Listen, to be human cannonball, you don't need to be flexible or fast or strong, just lonely and miserable as hell. I'm not lonely, I protested. Really? Roman laughed. So tell me, never mind sex. When was the last time someone even smiled at you? Before the show, they dressed me in silver overalls. I asked an old clown with a giant red nose if I didn't need some instructions before they shot me. The important thing, he mumbled, is to relax your body or to contract it. One or the other. I don't remember exactly. And you have to make sure that the cannon is pointed straight ahead so it doesn't miss the target. And that's it, I asked. Even in the silver overalls, I still stank of elephant shit. The circus manager came over and slapped me on the back. Remember, he said, after they shoot you at the target, you get straight back to stage, smile, and bow. And if, God forbid, something hurts, or even if you break something, you have to keep it in. You have to hide it so the audience doesn't see. The people in the audience looked really happy. They cheered for the clowns that pushed me into the mouth of the cannon, and the second before the fuse was lit, the fat clown with the flowers that sprayed water asked me, "You sure you want to do this? It's the last chance you have to change your mind." I nodded and he said, "You know that Ishtavan, the last human cannonball, is in hospital right now with 10 broken ribs." "He isn't," I said. "He's just a little drunk. He's sleeping in his caravan now." "Whatever you say," the fat clown sighed and struck the match. Looking back, I have to admit that the angle of the cannon was too sharp. Instead of hitting the target, I flew upwards, made a hole in the top of the tent, and continued flying to the sky, way up high. I flew over the abandoned drive-in theater where Odelia and I once used to go to see movies. I flew over the playground where a few dog owners walked around with rustling plastic bags. Little Max was there too, playing ball, and when I flew over him, he looked up, smiled, and waved hello. On Yarkon Street, behind the place where the American embassy keeps its dumpsters, I saw Tiger, my fat cat, trying to catch a pigeon. A few seconds later, when I landed in the water, the handful of people on the beach stood up and applauded for me. And when I came out of the water, a tall girl with a nose ring handed me a towel and smiled. When I came back to the circus, my clothes were still wet and everything was dark. The tent was empty, and in the middle of it, near the cannon I was shut out of, Roman was counting the day's take. "You've missed the target," he grumbled, "and you didn't come back to bow like we agreed. I'm deducting 400 for that." He handed me a few wrinkled bills, and when he saw I wasn't taking them, gave me a tough East European look and said, "If I were you, I'd take it." "Forget money, Roman," I said and walked over to the mouth of the cannon. "Do a friend a favor and shoot me out again."
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful story.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you for a very nice interview today. All the best for you in Tel Aviv.
Thank you. And I wish you the best in Bali. And I hope that one day soon we'll meet face to face.
Yes, that would be wonderful. So, Kembali 20 was made possible with the support of the Yayasan Mudra Swari Saraswati Patron Program and their donors. The Patron Program was created to seek assistance for the survival of both festival and the foundation. By making a valuable contribution to the Yayasan Patron Program, you will be directly involved in delivering both festivals in due time. Your contribution will guarantee the future of Indonesia's most meaningful cross-cultural platform of words, ideas, culture, and the creative arts. Follow at Ubud Writers Festival on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or visit ubudwritersfestival.com for more information about the Patron program.